Hi again, everyone. I'm Mark Walmsley. I'm the founder of the Arts and Culture Network. We're a growing global community of over 185,000 now across our 8 arts and culture LinkedIn groups. So I don't get to meet everybody, but when I do, it's a great pleasure. And Robert Walker has joined me today. Robert is one of our new full members, and we're going to have some fun. I'll give Robert a chance to say hello in a moment. We'll have a look at some of his work, and then I'm going to create Robert's fantasy cultural year from the answers to some easy questions to which there are no wrong answers. That's the plan. Robert, thank you so much for joining me for this today.
Mark's brilliant to be here. I'm excited about our chat up ahead. It's going to give some surprises, I'm sure.
It always does. Conversational detours, anecdotes, and surprises. Before we dive in, I wonder if you'd be kind enough to say hi to everyone watching. Tell us where you're based, and how you come to be doing what you're doing.
Yes, hi everyone, and welcome to this interview. I think the place to start is to say I'm from Suffolk. The accent is from Scotland, but I live in Suffolk, just northeast of London, and I've been down here for 30 odd years. So I'm based there, and I spent 36 years in telecoms as a projects director. So I'm getting things done is probably my strong point. But yeah, from an artistic point of view, I'm an oil painter and I paint contemporary, colourful, mythological based paintings. And I've been doing that for about 10 years now.
Sounds great. Let's have a look, shall we? I'm going to share my screen so that you can talk us through some of the work, if that's okay. So, if you'd like to explore more of Robert's work, the website is at theartistrobert.com. And here we are. And it's an immediate assault on the senses. I love it. Absolutely love it. Where should we look first, Robert, on here? Should we
Well,
go
we
to
could stick. We could stay on that one. But the gallery is the sort of main paintings page. But this particular one's called Dreamer, and we all know the story about the sirens attracting the sailors to luring them to the island. But sirens have to sleep as well. And this is sort of depicted. You've got the moon. You can see some moon symbols in the background there, and the notion of the spider's web and the entanglement of the sailors being drawn into the island normally, but of course she's sleeping and the sailors are going past. So I use the myths as a sort of leaping off point for the paintings, but once I've established not so much an academic figure in this painting, it's more sort of impressionistic. But normally I would paint an academic figure, and that's a starting off point for the composition. And then I would get into what I call the enjoyment process of adding colour and symbols and motifs into the background and providing it with some depth.
That's great. I love it. I've been browsing through this. There you are there. There's more here. You can follow Robert on Instagram at the artist Robert. Let's dive into the gallery, shall we? Um, so there's more here. So are these are these sold as originals or as prints,
Yeah,
Robert?
so these are all sold as originals.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. These are, and you can see that immediately the colour, the contemporary colouring, but I tend to focus on an academic realist approach when it comes to the figure work.
Hmm.
Bouguereau was and Roberto Ferro are sort of both heroes of mine, if you like, and the way that they approach the painting of the figures, very, very sort of French academic style. And of course, the galleries are full of people admiring these paintings, but not so much teaching of this type of style these days, unless you go to a classical atelier.
Yeah. Well, I love that the fun element that you're bringing into it, but that capacity you have to get those characters um, appearing in such a classical form, and then the sort of juxtaposition of the color and the shapes, I love. I think there are more on Instagram, aren't there?
Yeah, so my Instagram account, I've gone back to I've got an exhibition at Rugby Art Museum and Gallery,
Yeah.
May the 18th to the 30th. And in fact, Ruth Millington is doing a piece on it, but the art historian. But I sort of got drawn back to the sort of taking some of the colour and geometry from it, and back to a classical approach for six of the paintings,
Hmm.
because I've had feedback in terms of not everybody likes the bright coloration, but they do like a classical painting. So you
There,
can
there,
see,
I can see that, but we've talked about this before. The way that you've captured light here is just wonderful. Those characters and those figures in your work are the stars of the show, clearly. And I love the fact that there's a modern twist to that. So fantastic. Yeah,
yeah.
I love these. There's lots more here on Instagram. So do please explore those. Love that. Excellent. There you go. So that's the artist Robert on Instagram and theartistrobert.com. Excellent. Thank you for that whistle stop tour. Um, Now let's have some fun. We're going to create a fantasy cultural year for you. Excuse me. I think I've got an idea for what I'd like you to do. But in order to do this, I need to place you somewhere in the world. So my first question to you is, what's your favorite building?
Favorite building is probably the Pantheon in Rome.
Okay. For the benefit of of people who haven't seen it, I'm going to show
So
it.
yeah, and it's one of these buildings that I knew it was there.
Yeah.
I walked round the corner, my breath was taken away. It's like obviously hasn't moved in many years, but the scarring on the front of the building, the sense of history that is in its walls, and right in the middle of all this, human maelstrom of activity.
Mm,
Um, yeah, it took my breath away. The sort of as I say, the history in the walls and the marks on the walls and what it's seen. It's stupendous. And of course, when you walk in and you have that, the oculus on the ceiling and the light ray hitting the floor, it's amazing. It's
yeah.
amazing. I've been in many great buildings in the world, but that's the one that took my breath away.
Wonderful. Now, okay, so I'd like you to imagine that in this image here, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but over
Yes,
here it's a bar. Okay. Perfectly situated for admiring the view. I'd like you to be sitting there at 6 p.m. on a June evening, and there's a drink on the table next to you. What would we find?
that would be a margarita.
Margarita. Love it. Margarita and the Pantheon. Love that. And there's a book on the table next to you as well. What would we find there?
The book would probably be. I read a book called Fairy Tale a couple of years ago by Stephen King. Um, that is one of those down the rabbit hole adventures, and it took me into his world. It was fabulous. So
Mm,
probably something like that. But I do like the classics,
yeah.
Alone in Berlin and so on. But
I
yeah,
think it,
that probably be the book.
I think one of my favorite was Sepulchre. I'm not sure if it's Stephen King or not, but let's see. I think no, it's James Herbert. But
Oh yes, yes,
yeah,
the horror writer.
yeah, I love it. It's
Yeah,
great. Yeah. I used to collect signed photos, and there was a dealer in the Strand, and I was in there on my own once looking at images of Grace Kelly that I was going to buy, signed photos. And in walked James Herbert.
wow,
I know.
wow.
I was
I remember
properly,
I remember reading a load of his books from in the 80s.
yeah.
There's one about a dog. I think, is it Fluke?
Yes, Fluke.
It's written from the viewpoint of a dog. That's amazing.
Yeah, fantastic. Excellent. So we've got you next to the Pantheon, Margarita, and the book was Stephen King's
Fairy tale.
Fairy Tale. Love it. Now you've got headphones on and there's music playing. What would be playing?
What we'd probably be playing is Hannah Scott, who is a singer-songwriter from Ipswich, but she lives in London now.
Hmm.
And she has got the most, and she was a chorister. She's got a beautiful voice, and her lyrics and her melodies are fabulous. So I'm a big fan of Hannah's.
Right. I
She's
imagine
got,
she's on Spotify somewhere, isn't she?
yep, she's on
Yeah.
Spotify. She's had a bit of piece of music on TV, and she's got a new album out, or a new EP out actually. She's got a launch event in London coming up soon, but she's fabulous. I think she deserves more exposure.
Oh, we'll have to all look at her, find out more. Excellent. Now, that's enough. I've got enough based on then. I know Robert Walker now because it's the Pantheon, Margarita, the Stephen King book, and Hannah Scott. I love that. Now you're feeling quite pleased with yourself because you've just come from a meeting in the Pantheon with a wealthy Roman family foundation, okay, who are very keen to maintain the relevance of classical oil painting, but bring it up to date with a bit of a twist. Okay, so they want to go for a kind of neo classical approach, and they've identified your work as something that they would like to tour around the world to draw attention to the ongoing relevance of that wonderful figurative work. And the fact that you've captured some of those characters so beautifully and in a modern way, they've decided that your work is going to be toured around the world. Okay, does that sound
Sounds
good?
sounds fabulous.
The fee is enormous.
Yeah.
Okay, you've got to go with them. The travel is first class, and so is the accommodation. There's going to be a TV crew following you. There's a coffee table book deal in it. There is a TED talk when you get back, and should you wish, a very well paid global university lecture tour after. Okay. I'm assuming that sounds like fun.
This sounds fantastic. Yes.
Friends and family can come and visit you while you're away at their expense, and a virtual personal assistant will look after your affairs while you're traveling. All you have to do is to decide where you'd like the touring exhibition to go first.
Oh, I think I would like to open slightly low key in Tokyo.
Okay, nice. Great choice. Right, you're on the plane from Rome to Tokyo. Okay. All the paintings are safely in the hold, beneath you. You turned left on the aeroplane because you're traveling first class, and the steward brings you two things: a margarita and a note from the family foundation back in Rome. They have a musical challenge for you. They'd like you to limit your musical listening to one very specific genre or type of music, or even band or artist, for 1 year to the exclusion of all else.
Oh, goodness me. Okay.
I know, it's horrible.
Oh, who would that be? That
Yeah,
would probably be the Beatles.
good choice.
Yeah, probably be the Beatles. I'd
Somebody
have to
chose,
do. Yeah, yeah.
that's
I'd
a
have to
great
go with
choice.
them.
I didn't expect the head of Chinese art at Sotheby's to choose hip hop. She confided that she doesn't like it, but after a year of nothing else, she might do. Brilliant. Excellent. Now, we arrive in Tokyo and a group of young art students welcome you. They whisk you off into a loft apartment overlooking a cherry orchard and a palace. And they say that they're going to take you to a dance performance that evening, followed by dinner. And you get to choose the dance performance and the cuisine for dinner. Now, this is where the magic wand and the time machine comes in, because I can put any dance-based performance on the stage in front of you, any style, any group, any dancers, living or not. What would you like to watch in those circumstances?
I think I would enjoy Bali. The
Okay.
Berlin Ballet. Yeah.
Ballet it is. Something traditional, like swan
No,
lake,
something very uh,
progressive and avant-garde, perhaps.
yes, very very strongly lit like the. I don't know if you've seen the Ripley series on Netflix. A very black and
Mm.
white, beautifully shot series. Something like that. Can't remember the name of the choreographer, but um, there's a video where the guy in the middle is standing very still, but everyone else is moving in unison around him and harmony around him. It's very eye catching.
Okay. I'm going to see if we can find it.
I think it's a Berlin Ballet Company.
Berlin.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, let's see. Yeah, I'm not sure I found the right thing, but is it Yuri Posakov? Could be. Don't know. Stats Ballet Berlin. Berlin. That looks good.
Yes, I think
Yeah.
that's yeah.
Okay, that's the show. Now, dinner afterwards, you get to choose the national cuisine. What are we going for?
That'll be Italian.
We're perfect.
Nice bit simple spaghetti with olive oil and garlic.
Yeah,
Nothing fancy.
we put too much on ours, don't we? In Rome, if you have a spaghetti bolognese or a carbonara, there's very little sauce. It's just mainly pasta, isn't it?
Yeah.
We tend to have a ring of pasta, heaps of mince on the top.
Meat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
excellent. Now we're going to buzz again from Tokyo on our whistle stop introduction to your year. Where are we going next?
We're going
Where's
to
the
New York. New
New
York
York?
is next.
Fantastic. Now, it's sport day in the United States when we get there. We've had breakdancing in the Olympics. We've got ice dancing, synchronized swimming, and gymnastics to music. Some sport is clearly performance art. Um, so I'm going to put a sporting event in front of you. And again, I've got a time machine and a magic wand. We can go back in time to sporting events, or any sport for you to watch or participate in, should you wish. What sporting event am I putting on the stage in
I
front of
would
you?
like to see Roger Bannister run the 4 minute mile.
Great choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fantastic. That black and white footage is really resonant, isn't it? Love that. That's
Haven't
great.
tried it. Haven't tried it. I don't know how he did it. Even now.
4 day mile. Yes, possibly for me anyway. Excellent. Now let's buzz again. Where are we going from New York? Where's the tour hitting next?
I think I'd have to end up in London.
Yeah,
Home
well,
time.
that's fortunate because I was going to whisk you back to London anyway.
Ah,
Okay.
okay.
So I'm coming to the launch. Okay. Um, we're going to go out every night of the week together to do something cultural. On Monday, we're going back in time to a rock or pop concert of your choice. Tuesday, we're going to the theatre for a play. Wednesday is a musical in the West End or Broadway. Thursday is opera or ballet. And Friday is movie night. And between us, we can choose what we see. So, is there a concert that you attended that you'd love to use the time machine for and go and experience again?
If I had to go and experience it again, probably Paul McCartney 1979. Yeah.
Wow.
Wings. Paul
Wings.
McCartney and Wings. Yeah.
Great one.
Played a few
And
Beatles stuff. Yeah.
love that. And in a slight twist to that question, is there an artist who you could have seen, didn't, and now can't?
Easy. That was Queen. Because my
Oh,
wife managed to get there and I didn't. I was too busy studying.
mine's Bob Marley.
Crazy,
I
crazy.
know.
I
Bob
should have
Marley,
gone.
79. I could have seen Bob Marley. Um, Fantastic. Excellent. Now, what about a theatre play? We're in London, so we've got Shakespeare's Globe, if you fancy that.
Yeah, and haven't been there. Would like to go there, and would probably go and see Hamlet because studied that at school. Seen it several times, but yeah, I think I would like to see it in its near original format, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, we'll be
Yeah.
standing there. Have you seen the movie Hamnet? yet?
I haven't. My wife has, but apparently I've seen some clips from trailers from it, but it looks quite powerful.
It's very powerful. She does a great job. Um, Fantastic.
She's an amazing
Excellent.
actress. Yeah.
Yes. Now, what about a West End or a Broadway musical, Robert?
I'll probably go for Les Mis because the melodies and the music is so fantastic, and I like the variety of the voices that they have, from solo to duets to choruses.
Mm.
It keeps you on your toes all the way through. Yeah,
It's
love
full
it.
of it's full of bangers, isn't it? It really is.
Yeah,
There are no weak songs in that show.
yeah.
I remember I saw it when it was at the RSC in the early 80s, before it transferred. And the first half was an hour and three quarters long. So you couldn't have a drink, but you couldn't have a pint before the show. Um,
Gasping.
yeah, absolutely. It's not quite that long now, I don't think. But now, opera or ballet for Thursday?
Opera.
And do you have a favorite that you'd like to
So
see?
I haven't been to a lot of opera, but recently I had the pleasure of doing Madame Butterfly at the Sydney Opera House, which was fantastic.
Mm,
Um, so I would say that, or Turandot, I suppose. Yeah,
Turandot.
Nessun and all that. Yeah,
Yeah, Turandot, wonderful arias in that one. Fantastic. Puccini, you can't go wrong. La Boheme, Tosca,
so
Turandot.
emotional, so
Yeah,
emotional.
fantastic. And then Friday is film night. We've got the IMAX at the London Bridge, huge screen, great surround sound, best seats in the house. What are we watching?
Okay, if it was an old feel-good movie, it would be It's a Wonderful Life with James Stewart.
Hmm.
If it was a modern movie, it would probably be The Phoenician Scheme by Wes Anderson, which is visually stunning,
Oh,
absolutely stunning. I think it's his latest one, but every shot is a painting or a photograph. Yeah.
wow, fantastic. Now, as a slight treat, before I send you off on your trip, I've got two things for you. One is a visit to a fictitious, digitally enhanced art gallery. You can put on a virtual reality headset and step into the work of a famous artist. It be,
Oh,
it becomes three-dimensional, 360 degrees. There's movement and there's sound. Um, we don't think this is possible yet, but it won't be far off. It's not projection or immersion in a room. You're in the painting. You get to see in three dimensions what the artist could only show us in two. Whose work would you like to step into?
it's a very difficult one. Um, I would probably have to go for a Salvador Dali painting because it is surreal.
Mm.
I feel as though rather than stepping into reality, I'd like to step into something that was askew to that. Um, there is a painting by him. I'm trying to remember the title of it, but it's with the tiger,
It'll be here
the the,
somewhere.
the jumping tiger.
Let's have a look. Hang on.
Is it the apotheosis of Homer? Maybe.
There we are. Um,
Oh, Dream Caused. Yeah, Dream Caused by B Flight. The pomegranate. Yeah,
yeah, fantastic.
that.
Dreamcore. Yeah,
Yeah, that's very visually stunning. That.
yeah, you're in there in the midst of all that. Great choice. And now, finally, before I let you go off and do this wonderful year of touring with your work, I'm going to give you a hero lunch. So you can choose one person to join you for a leisurely 2 hour lunch, Italian restaurant, London. You can choose anyone you like, famous or otherwise, living or not, real or fictitious character. Who would you like to have lunch with in those circumstances?
Because I'm obsessed with still learning how to paint, I think I would go for a guy called Roberto Ferri, who
Mm.
is a contemporary figurative painter. He's just painted the Pope, But he's known for his mythological, realist, dream style works.
Oh, wow. Look at this.
Um,
Let me share it with
he's
everyone.
a modern master without a doubt.
Look at that.
Yeah,
Wonderful. There's the Pope.
yeah. I think he's done two or three of them now actually, but he's
Yeah,
highly revered and he's incredibly masterful with his brush. Um,
fantastic.
Epitome of modern. Well, I say modern painting, but he's alive and well and doing it now.
Yeah, wonderful. Fantastic. That's a great choice. There you go, Robert. That's your fantasy cultural year. You continue the world tour. We'll probably take in Sydney and Dubai, Vancouver, Cape Town.
Yes, please.
Yeah. The TV show is a great success. The book is on several coffee tables. You've become the go-to commentator on the revival of a modern approach to classical art. Um, and the TED Talk is a huge success. Have you enjoyed your fantasy cultural year?
Fantastic. I understand why it's called fantasy, but you have to hang on to vision. You have to hang on to vision. So, no, that's
Yeah.
wonderful. I've enjoyed the trip.
Oh, I'm so pleased. Well, thank you so much for doing this and for being such a good sport. And thank you also for being one of our full members. We're entirely member funded at the moment as a community, so it's very grateful. Thank you once again, Robert, for sharing your fantasy cultural year.
Thanks, Mark. Cheers.